So thanks for hanging out with us. And yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation. And so much so that I wore my Be a Good Digital Citizen shirt, because when we think about the future of Alberta and we think about the future of a technology and innovation driven Alberta, we have to remember that humans come first. So excellent. Okay, let's get into it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce each of you with a good old formal bio. But then while we go through the formal bio, I want each of you to think about a data point, one out of left field, that also just points to the type of human you are. So think about an interesting data point about yourself, maybe something that maybe your mom goes and touts about you, and I'll turn it over to you in a quick moment. So first, please welcome Kelly Cherniwchan. Kelly is passionate about building innovative AI technologies that bridge the gap between people and their data. Kelly holds an MBA in finance and previously co-founded a cardiovascular imaging software company, now recognized as a global leader in the space, where he served as a CFO and COO. In this role, Kelly served as a vast potential and business value of AI and began delving into the world of data science and machine learning. In 2016, Kelly founded Chata, where he currently serves as CEO. Chata's dynamic team of data scientists, machine learning engineers, developers, and business professionals work to build AI technologies that empower people to access their data easily and intuitively using natural language, which is key. Kelly, welcome.
Thank you.
Kris, welcome to you as well. Kris Reid is the co-founder of Neo Financial, Canada's first digital banking platform designed to support local businesses while providing Canadians a better way to grow and manage their own money. Founded in 2019, Neo has raised over $114 million in funding through top-tier investors such as Peter Thiel's Valor Ventures and has grown to over 500 employees. They've even been recognized as one of Canada's top tech startups. Prior to Neo, Kris spent an early years as a developer in the Canadian startup scene and was CTO at the influential cryptocurrency startup Vigogo in Inc. and led software development in San Francisco startup Lottery.com. He traveled the world as a consultant to startups and global tech companies and as a published author and speaker at conferences including Agile and O'Reilly OSCON. Kris holds a master's in software engineering. Welcome, Kris. Really happy to have you.
Thanks, Jasmine. Thanks.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the Honorable Minister of Service Alberta, Nate Glubish, welcome to you as well. Prior to your political career, Nate was a dedicated professional in facilitating investments in Alberta technology companies. He began his career with Foundation Equity, an investment firm where for over 8 years he rose to partner and participated in the negotiation and success of several multi-million-dollar technology business investments. Most recently, Nate worked for Vancouver-based Yaletown Ventures, a VC fund where he oversaw investments into Alberta-based technology companies. Nate's passionate about helping Alberta companies raise investment capital to commercialize innovative new technologies around the world. In preparation for the 2019 election, Nate left his position with Yaletown to focus full-time on his election campaign. And on April 16th, Nate was elected to represent the riding of Strathcona-Sherwood Park for the UCP and was sworn in as Minister of Service Alberta. And since day one as minister, he works hard to address longstanding issues for us as Albertans and has brought a passion of innovation with him to his ministry by challenging his team to transform government services using technologies, really focused on modernizing outdated platforms. We can make sure we can prepare and provide services using emerging technologies such as AI and ML. They've already helped the government of Alberta solve emerging problems and realize significant cost efficiencies. Minister, thank you for joining us today. Happy to have you. All right, so I warned you each an interesting data point about yourself. Kelly, let's start with you.
Yeah, I love karaoke. It's core to my soul. So the whole COVID over the last couple of years has been crushing because you are sharing the microphone around and you cannot social distance. So looking forward when things can finally get back to normal and I can get back up on stage and make a fool of myself.
Excellent. Is your top genre 80s rock ballad?
Exactly. Yep. Hair band, everything. Yeah.
Beautiful. Excellent. Kris, let's go down to you. Interesting data point about yourself.
Before I share that, there's a rumor that there may be a karaoke setup at the YYC DataCon after party. So if you come out for that, you could sing in front of all of us and prove how good you really are.
No, I didn't say good. I didn't say good.
Years of honing your craft, however that is. Thank
Yeah.
you for plugging the after party, Kris. Great.
No problem. The trouble with a fact out of left field is that people will think you're a little crazy if you tell them. I think one about me is that I can read palms. I'm familiar with all the lines and what they mean, and I don't think it actually works. But I know the mechanism to tell the future through the lines on your hand.
Wonderful. So it sounds like the after party also needs the velvet curtain that you pull. Kris is sitting at the table and he's there to do your palm
Yeah,
reading.
exactly.
Okay.
You can also see your future in this crystal ball up here.
You bring it with you all places. That's perfect. Minister Glubish, interesting data point about yourself.
So, well, I'll give a couple. One is I'm a Neo customer. That's for you, Kris.
Nice.
And
Nice.
also, I was an investor in that cardiovascular imaging company that Kelly co-founded. So I've known Kelly a long time and really impressed with the work he's done. But about me, something that most people wouldn't know is that on the side, while I was in the venture capital business, I also was a keyboard player in a pop rock band that toured all across the country and did 250 shows in 2 years, and was the recipient of Rock Recording of the Year from the Edmonton Music Awards in 2014. So little known facts, and that hence
These
the
are
long
great facts.
as a
There you go.
We have the makings of a band here. Maybe this rolls into a band. We'll see.
We have a recording studio at my house, so we can do everything from accordions to xylophones. So we got ourselves covered, you guys. Wonderful. Excellent. Well, thank you. I'm really excited about today's conversation. So, we're going to dive right into it. And, I want to start with a little bit of, again, even just how we each got here based on what your area of focus is and how it ties to data and the future of Alberta's data economy. And so, Kelly, I'm going to start with you. I want to talk about Chata, and I want to talk about what was the aha moment that led to the genesis of you and the team getting started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thanks. I remember the day very vividly. We had a board meeting for Circle, and we would typically utilize Salesforce.com as our CRM. That's where some of the reporting was done. We utilized Power BI and Tableau dashboard just to show dashboards. But I remember the one particular board meeting, and I'm sure Nate was asking some of these questions, but we got about 10 questions in about 5 minutes that couldn't be answered. And that wasn't a competency issue for the team. It was because we didn't have access to that information. So the thought process was, imagine someone could ask a question in natural language and have that dynamically translated to database query language. So all the non-technical people around the boardroom could be able to access that information instantaneously and have a much more productive meeting. So that was the beginnings of everything at that. Now, back at that time, the technology wasn't far enough along yet. And it actually still took a number of years to fully develop out, for sure. So we've been working on that problem a long time, but we have at least solved it for many use cases and are employing it now in a number of different industries.
Fantastic. Yeah, terrific. Thank you very much. And Kris, we're here to talk about data and data-driven decision making. And I'm curious, what were the data points that led to you spinning up Neo and getting it started?
Yeah, I think the biggest data point was looking at my bank statement and seeing the fees that Canadians are, including me, are charged, and feeling really ripped off. Or if you've ever had like a mutual fund investment, like the mutual fund advisors taking a lot of your money, right? And I feel like that's kind of been a problem in Canada for a long time. So when I had the chance to, really try and start another company to do something about it, I leapt at it, and that continues to be something that I'm really passionate about. Is just like honestly saving people money.
Beautiful. Yeah, exactly. Passion drives everything. Okay, so I want to get into the real meat of what it is that we mean when we talk about data and we talk about economy, we talk about Alberta. And so, Minister Glubish, I'm gonna start with you. And today I'm here to nudge each of you along, so you can interject. You guys can hop in with each other. Let's just have a good conversation, right? As if we're breaking bread. But Minister Glubish, let's start with the fact that, Calgary, and Alberta as a whole, we're a resource-based economy. And a lot of the narrative that we tell ourselves and the rest of the world is based in resource, particularly within a particular lens, because that's our legacy. But data is a resource. And so, I want you to wear both your hats, one as a cabinet, minister, and one as, a life as an investor. And just what role and what do you think Albertans need to understand about data as a resource and the role that data plays in the future of our economy and our province? So maybe you want to get us started.
Sure. No, thank you. I think it's a great way to kick off the conversation, and it's a topic I'm very passionate about. So, and Kelly, I might, you might want to jump in here because you have some experience on this, but I always like to start by telling the story about Circle Cardiovascular Imaging, which is the company that Kelly co-founded. It's a Calgary-based medical technology company. Started, the first venture round they did was back in 2010. That's when I got involved. And, because I always think, like, when we talk about data and we talk about the possibilities of data, most Albertans are like, what do you mean? I don't know what that is. And then they start thinking of, like, are you like talking about selling my data? That's not good. But that's not what we in the tech scene mean when we're talking about data. And so I like to just share the story about, say, what was a really exciting accomplishment that really moved the needle to benefit Albertans that was homegrown here in Alberta. And that starts to open the possibilities of what could we do if we did this at scale. So if you'll indulge me for just a couple of minutes to set the stage. I mean, when I first crossed paths with Kelly and the team at Circle, basically their pitch to me was, and I'm sort of dumbing it down a bit, but they basically said, look, we've got a team of some world-leading cardiac imaging researchers that are respected all around the world. And we have a team of really solid AI and machine learning data scientists. And what we want to do is to create new revolutionary tools in the cardiac imaging space to help cardiologists and radiologists, who are some of the most expensive specialists in the medical profession, to be more efficient at what they're doing, to be faster, to automate wherever you can, to make them more accurate so that they can give a diagnosis to a patient sooner than they could without these tools, and have it be more accurate so the patient's getting better care, faster care, and we're saving the healthcare system money. That was the idea. And the approach they wanted to take was to say, look, nobody's really using cardiac MRIs in this space right now because the data in those scans is so dense that you just can't make any sense of it. The computer tools that exist today can't make any sense of it. But they said, you know what, that's a problem today, but it's also an opportunity because it's so dense that if we can find a way to train our tools to understand this, we'll be able to do things with this that you can't do with any other imaging modality. And so what they did is they went out to all the teaching hospitals around the world and said, hey, you know who we are, you like who we are, you teach all of our publications. And the school said, yeah, of course we know who you are. And they said, you know what, here's what we're trying to do. What do you think? Oh, that'd be amazing if you could do that, was the response. And so what Circle said is, well, in order to do this, we need access to large data sets of cardiac MR scans. And you have those data sets. Would you work with us in a privacy by design framework that respects the patient confidentiality, that focuses on anonymizing or de-identifying this data? And so that we can build a data set that's large enough that we can start doing what we do best, which is our data science, and analyze this to start creating new tools and technologies to solve problems in new ways. Well, fast forward 10 years, and look, you've got a company that has grown to well over 100 staff. It's still homegrown here in Calgary. It's doing millions and millions of dollars of business every year, selling their software to hospitals in 1,500 hospitals in over 45 countries around the world. This is really exciting. And guess what? It's making healthcare better. It's giving Alberta patients better results, as well as allowing Albertans to benefit from the economic growth and the job creation and the investment attraction of that company. So, when I think about the power of data and the possibilities for Alberta, I think, what if we had hundreds of medical technology companies just like Circle Cardio here in Alberta, using their expertise on new and exciting medical advances and technological innovations? What could we accomplish in terms of making our healthcare system stronger and building more capacity, which is more prevalent now than ever after having gone through the challenges of COVID? So for me, what really got me excited about becoming a minister in the Alberta government with my tech background was to say, how can we as the Alberta government move Alberta into a direction where we are more open than ever before to partnering with innovators and academics across the province to add value to government's data and to create new tools. And that's a big part of what I'm focusing on as minister today.
Excellent, excellent. And Kelly, how lucky to have someone that's able to tell also just the story of Circle, you know, as a real advocate and ambassador.
That's way more elegant than I can tell it. The only claim to fame that I see is that we were using convolutional neural nets even before they became a thing, and we were using them in the medical imaging space. So for all the data scientists on there, we were toying around with those back in 2007, 2008 is when we first got going. So now, as many know, that's the standard computer vision networks for facial recognition and all those other pieces as well. So, but the only reason that was achievable was because of the early investors, right? The angels early on, you know, and then Nate and the rest of the other funds that came in on that initial venture round, that patient dollars to be like, look, we know, we buy into the vision, we know there's fundamental deep tech research that needs to be done, and we're willing to stay the course with that. So,
yeah, excellent. You know, and you know, again, data is that resource. We can make, you know, better, faster, even safer decisions based on it. We can increase efficiency. We can have outcomes, you know, that have broader impact on many stakeholder groups and society as a whole. And, you know, banking and being a challenger bank and really disrupting that, Kris, you know, to the point, my bank account, my investment statements, those are my data. And there's a lot of decisions that players around me can make. So to average Albertans, data wields a lot of power to third parties and also to themselves. So what do you think Albertans as a whole need to understand about, you know, the power of data as a resource for this province and its kind of engine of innovation?
Yeah, it is a lot of everyday data. And, you know, I think sometimes when we think about data, it can be exciting to think about an MRI data because it's like, wow, that sounds like something from the science fiction, you know, movies. But everyday data is just as powerful. So the data that you get on a simple bank statement, or even like a simple receipt from buying a cup of coffee at a coffee shop, you know, that's data too. And we've only begun to scratch the surface of how we use that everyday data as well. I think that's, you know, more the focus at NEO and how we can use data to be a disruptor and to improve Albertans' lives. You know, we're really looking at often really simple things from, you know, what are people's preferences when it comes to spending their money, or are people struggling to pay their bills, and then really offering, you know, help, assistance, and a better experience. And NEO is, yeah, of course, we're in this banking space, but if you think about it, absolutely anyone could, you know, use the same kinds of data, right? So just imagine a shoe store, you know, at the mall, they can use that data too. And that was actually, you know, part of the thesis behind NEO. Partner with a lot of local businesses and see if we can actually help them. You know, hey, we're the computer science people. You know, they're maybe out there selling, you know, plants, which is incredible, or they're you know, building a retail store and selling, you know, locally made clothing. Well, they're not computer scientists, right? And they don't have the budget to actually go out and build any sort of data tools, but they still have that everyday data. And you know, there are also amazing companies out there offering tools, but it costs like a lot of money. You know, honestly, like a lot of local merchants, even if they bought a platform, it would cost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. They maybe are running out of a kiosk, right? And so there's just no hope for them to leverage their everyday data. NEO can help them do that kind of thing for free. And you know, we do that by essentially, you know, offering to partner up with them and create some sort of win-win for them and their customers. And where they get intelligence and data to make themselves, you know, successful.
What I really appreciate about that, you know, Kris, is when you empower individuals to understand and make inferences with their data, you also add to larger acceleration of digital transformation transitions, in groups and organizations and in the economy, because it becomes more understood. I think that they realize the agency and autonomy that they have, but also, it's like over time, let's get a bunch of citizen machine learners, because they actually know what data sets are and they know how to use it. It doesn't become a foreign language.
What's funny is we often talk with a lot of sort of local businesses, and their initial reaction sometimes is, I don't need data, not interested. And I've got a business to run. And then we can just talk a little bit about how some of their larger corporate competitors are already beating them with data science, and it is the Starbucks of the world or the Walmart of the world. And it's like, do you know what they're able to understand and achieve and do, and how it influences their business? And we see it actually makes sense right away. Oh, actually, that would be extremely helpful for me at this scale. Even though I'm not a Walmart or a Starbucks level company.
Yeah, and so what I appreciate about that, I think it leads to another question, which was later in my list, but I'm going to bring it up now, is, in the introduction, Tim spoke to kind of three pillars, right now, as far as when we look at Alberta's digital or data economy, and, AI and advancements there, investments into the innovation ecosystem, particularly in the realm of data, AI, ML, and really digital transformation and digital transition of a multitude of industries. And, I often like to speak about the fact that we are in a great rewrite right now. There's always, we're always at some point in the, acceleration, hockey stick when it comes to digital technologies and growth, but every single industry is going through a massive rewrite. The experience of COVID, legacy industries that are looking to either pivot or die. And there's always that story, but it feels like it's happening at extreme volume and rapid pace everywhere right now. And so my curiosity from each of your perspectives is, where are we in the maturity of that digital, transformation here in Alberta, and what role do folks like yourselves and folks in the audience here play in accelerating that? It's a big one. Maybe Minister Glubish, let's start with you. Of course, I think you've made some investments and announcements recently, but on a lens of again, just digital transformation as a province, maturity, how do we harness this?
Yeah, well, look, I think I'm glad you bring it up, because one of the things that I've been saying ever since I became minister is just saying, first, technology is not an industry on its own, but it's actually the future of every industry. And then I go on to say it must be the future of government, because when I became a minister, what I learned is that a lot of our systems are like 35 years old, and there's only 5 people alive today who now know how to code in those languages. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I mean, like, Kris and Kelly know what I'm talking about, right? Like, this stuff is so old. It predates the internet. It predates mobile phones. It predates cell phones in some cases. It's crazy. And so how can we expect to deliver high quality services to Albertans as a government if all of our systems are so antiquated and they're not positioning us well to modernize and to scale? I mean, we don't have everything built into cloud-based servers, where if we go from one day of having 5,000 Albertans hitting a website asking for some information, and then the next day it's 500,000 and everything goes down. Well, that's what modern technologies and platforms that are built on cloud-enabled systems allow us to do. So when I first became minister, I realized we have so much opportunity to transform government with more modern digital tools, so that we can deliver better quality services and outcomes for Albertans while also saving the taxpayer money. But it's going to require some vision, some leadership, some culture change for sure. And so that's been a big part of my focus as the Minister of Service Alberta, which, for those who don't know, and don't feel bad, I didn't even know what Service Alberta was when I got the call to serve as the minister. But a big part of what I do is I'm responsible for the technology backbone of government. So there's so much opportunity. And a big part of what I've been doing is trying to change that culture, set the stage for more collaboration with innovators in the Alberta tech scene, whether they be academics and researchers or whether they be commercializers and inventors and entrepreneurs. There's so much opportunity to work together to do a better job. And just to tie that back to the data conversation, as a VC, of course, I had lots of opportunity to see the power of technologies to disrupt all kinds of industries. But for me, the most exciting disruptions and innovations, they were data-driven innovations. And I believe, as you talked about, Jasmine, this, being a part of this big rewrite, I think a big part of that is because the computing power has risen enough that it's enabled our artificial intelligence and machine learning data scientists to do so much more than the way they could do 10 years ago. And that's opened the floodgates of what's possible. And so now every industry is being transformed with data-driven innovation. And I'm just so excited about the opportunities to work with folks like Kelly and Kris and their colleagues across the industry in Alberta to ensure that the government of Alberta doesn't stay 50 years behind and instead can start thinking 50 years in the future so that we can better anticipate and meet the needs of Albertans.
Well, and the role of the government being able to think and be in the future creates conditions for folks like Kelly, Kris, and their teams to also move at more rapid pace with less barriers as well. Kelly, when we think about Chata and the ability to pull insights easily using natural language, that to me feels, again, like an accelerator for digital transformation for a variety of industries. What are you hearing from your customers? What's the maturity level look like, even just as far as what you see here in Alberta along that digital kind of transition, spectrum here in our own backyard?
Yeah, well, we haven't worked much in the government at all yet, but I know some of our experience in kind of corporate Alberta, just in all honesty, has been, I think digital transformation is something a lot of people talk about, but aren't really undertaking very much. And I think we're always guilty here of being a very conservative corporate culture. I don't think that's changed very much at all. I think there's little projects here and there, but unfortunately, we go south of the border and the corporations have these huge innovation funds just to test something out or pilot something from that standpoint. So I think we got some pretty big gaps to close from there. But I think the most important thing, and one of the kind of the big realizations, it doesn't matter where you're located, and even in some of the conversations here, kind of goes back to something that the previous speaker, Steve, had mentioned. He said, humans the center of computing. And that's exactly it. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. The human being, that non-technical business professional, is still the smartest AI that organization has. So there's certain investments going in because it's cool, it's sexy, this magic AI that's just going to provide all the answers to all the corporate. We're still a long ways away from that in a real practical, full scalable, deployment scenario. But now what you're seeing these last few years is companies providing tools and systems to more empower, whether they're the data analysts who are actually building those prediction models, or they're the non-technical business user who just needs the information to make data-driven decisions, but they can't because they don't write database query language or something like that. So it's this, it's always the process of, okay, you're going in to make a data analyst's life better. You're not going in to disrupt the data analyst's life. You're going in to make it better. And when we have this ratio we talk about in our company, it's 1100. It's the 1141 to 1 ratio, which is there's 1141 knowledge workers to every data analyst in the world. So when you think about that, data analysts are busy enough executing on corporate priorities and everything else. The last thing they need to do is go run some report for a business person. It's the last thing they want to do. And from there, so we're seeing a little bit of a change, and it's starting to drive from those business units now. So the needs coming from the business units. And I think you'll see that more and more as digital transformation moves forward. It'll be the operators. It'll be the people in the field. It'll be whoever else to say, look, if you want me to be making decisions out in the field, I need the tools to be able to do that. And I thought that tied in well to the previous speaker who was basically promoting that entire message.
Yeah, absolutely. Kris, thoughts from your end? This is a big topic, but curious of your lens.
Yeah, something Kelly just mentioned that made me really think is that south of the border, in the United States, there are these huge funds, and we see corporate America, often innovating ahead of Canada, right? That's just like sort of the sad situation, sad truth. And then, you come back home to Canada and you look around and you see Canadians innovating for corporate America. people are just essentially working for maybe a US company, and a lot of the best science and technology we build is for US companies, and then it gets deployed in the US, and then maybe 5 years later or 10 years later, you might see it come here, and actually start affecting our lives here in Canada. And that's something that I think is kind of unfortunate, and a challenge, that every company and every Albertan and everyone in Canada should take seriously. We don't want to be sort of a second place nation. We don't want to be not one of the innovators. And so what does it take to do that in the data space? Well, we need to be innovating for ourselves. We need to be making sure that we build companies in Canada. We need to make sure we build companies in Calgary. We need to also make sure that the products we build are available in Canada and in Calgary to people and to companies here. And that's what's going to create that long-term effect. Not just building something cool and then maybe selling it in the States or something like that, or around the world, but also selling it at home.
You're speaking to, which I think is a really exciting topic, so I want to dive in, and that is, the extractive model of innovation and the regenerative model of innovation. And so when we think about talent development, when we think about the technology advancements, and of course even research and the commercialization, especially when we look at artificial intelligence, the ability to understand and build, but also even the application and insights that we can pull from data. Talk to me each about what you're seeing around how we can continue to build more that regenerative approach to our talent development and investing in building the ideas and the benefits locally, of course, with global impact. But where are we in that? What are we doing well? What are you sensing, even with maybe areas that we need to ramp up investment or support in multiple ways?
How about I go first, and I'll be quick and then I'll let these guys chime in. I think something that we need to do is believe in ourselves. In Calgary and in Alberta, you wouldn't believe how many people say to me when we tell them about Neo, why didn't you start the company in Toronto? Honestly, it's confidence. First of all, I think it's ambition, and we all need to have it. We all need to understand that people in Alberta and in Calgary have access to first-rate universities, first-rate educations. The experience we've had, in our past is first-rate. All the research we've done in Alberta, in all kinds of industries, is first-rate, and we can continue to apply that. We need the confidence to actually get it off the ground and get going. And sometimes I think even here in Alberta and Calgary, we don't have the confidence to get it going, and then we lose before we start out. And that's the confidence from entrepreneurs, also investors, and and really everyone needs to be on the same page about it. I'm curious what these guys think.
Yeah, Kelly, do you want to take a stab, or Minister Glubish, you ready?
Yeah,
go for it.
Yeah, I can
Sure.
give this one a whirl. So two things, and this is more just my this is just my personal I guess thoughts is, well, thoughts plus experiences. We need, with the talent development, and I'm talking like developing that real deep tech. So I'm very biased to that kind of deep tech, hard tech side. We can't bring talented people into the province and give them very mediocre problems to solve, right? We have to give them very difficult problems. So companies, like it's fine to pay big dollars to attract top PhDs or other types of data scientists, any other types of degrees coming in the data science role, but we have to give them hard problems to work on. And we also have to provide a portion of their time that they can do the research or applied research on their own, right? So that's one critical thing that's core to my being. The second piece that's core to my being in building this whole talent, regenerating and everything else, we have to make everybody money, right? And that's the key thing. My dream or the vision is that the people who jump on the bus and ride down the bus, if we end up being successful, those people end up getting together in different groups and starting new companies, or getting together with other people and starting new companies, maybe self-funded a little bit themselves, and in order to grow that up. right? So you kind of have to create wealth a little, and the same thing with investors too, right? You got to create some wealth before people start, decreasing their risk profile. But that's a really, really core component. And there is another point mentioned about universities. A lot of people don't know Circle Cardiovascular actually came out of the tech transfer office at the University of Calgary. There was a company creation team that was put together called Ignite, small little seed fund to put some dollars in and then spin it out and go get investment, right? Same thing with Parvis Therapeutics as well, who's been very successful. And then we kind of hit a pause in that a little bit. I don't know really why that was exactly, but like, Peter Sanisham and some other individuals are kind of involved in getting that going again. And again, that's where we can bridge that research, and we can make the, universities, researchers, whomever else, the kind of dollars to keep the entire engine going at the end of the day.
Minister Glubish, what role does the provincial government play or should play again in this kind of accelerant of both the mindset and the growth of a data-driven economy?
Sure. Thanks. And, Kelly especially touched on a couple of points I'd like to build on. And I know your question is specifically about the provincial government's role, but I'd like to speak a little bit more broadly. I will get to that, though, I promise. But, I like to just talk about my vision as like a VC for a second. I mean, it's true. Yes, Alberta historically has not had the same level of startups, investment as, say, Ontario, which is a good example. But I think one of the things to ask is, like, what's different there than here that has happened historically? And in my view, I don't believe it's that we're never going to get there. I believe it's that we're at a different stage in the journey. Look at what happened in Ontario before BlackBerry and after BlackBerry. Because BlackBerry was the first big multi-billion-dollar unicorn that Ontario ever had as in the tech space. I mean, you could argue maybe that Nortel was a part of that too, until the Chinese stole their tech. Maybe I shouldn't say that. But long story short, you had a couple of unicorns in Ontario in the telecom space that not only created tens of thousands of jobs, high-paying, good-paying tech jobs, but they also created an ecosystem around those unicorns of folks who maybe made some good money there on stock options and said, I've got a really good idea, and I built a network of teammates that have all worked in this space, and now we're going to go spin something off and build our own thing in our garage. But we can self-fund it because we made money on our options. This speaks to Kelly's comments about we need people to be making some money. And then that just sort of steamrolled and built in some exponential growth in Ontario of folks who had some wealth that they could deploy to their own ideas. They had a network of people who had a proven track record in the tech space, and they just started building more and more things. And that naturally built a very healthy, strong, growing tech ecosystem. And so for Albertans to be like, how come Alberta is not the same as Ontario? Well, we haven't had a multi-billion-dollar unicorn success story yet, but I believe it's coming. If you look at what's happened in the last 3 years alone, we've had, number one, a doubling of the number of tech companies, which I think is really exciting. We've got over 3,000 startup tech companies today. We've seen exponential growth in venture capital investment into Alberta tech companies with well over $400 or $500 million in the last year, compared to, I think we were well under 100 million just a few years ago. This is some is there more room to grow? 100%. Do we want to see more growth? 100%. But we should not continue to beat ourselves up in Alberta because there's been some extremely exciting progress. And I think that that's a testament to the innovative and entrepreneurial spirit of Albertans. It's a testament to the strength of our academic institutions. But it's, I think, a focus on creating the environment that will allow those entrepreneurs to thrive and succeed. And so a couple of things that I think the Alberta government's role is, number one, let's make sure we have an attractive tax environment so that when you do have a home run, you keep a larger share of your winnings and can reinvest that into new things. I think another area is to make sure that we have enough talent being trained in our already really great institutions. And so, I'm really excited about the fact that Budget 2022 includes a $171 million investment to target the creation of 7,000 new seats in our post-secondary institutions for those areas like tech, like computer science, like AI and machine learning, that are in the largest demand right now. we can be training more people and ensuring that those programs will grow. That is how we're going to make sure that we have enough folks so that fast-growing companies like Neo can, have the right folks here in Alberta to expand their teams to reach and realize on their vision. So those are a couple of things, and I think there's many others that we could touch on, but I think it's just important for us not to lose sight on that some of the things that have helped create success in Ontario are happening here. We're just a few years behind in that journey, but we're still going to get there. And once we've had a couple of these unicorns reach that status, and to be honest, I think Neo could very well be one of them. I think, Cement is another, Benevity is another, and there's several others that are reaching that billion-dollar valuation status as we speak. I think Circle Cardio is not far off from reaching that level as well. So we've got a lot of very exciting companies that are reaching that very mature state in their technology development, that the kind of investment attraction they're going to bring of hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, the number of jobs they're going to create, and the number of folks from around the country and around the world that they're going to attract to coming to Alberta is going to create that critical mass that Ontario saw come from the BlackBerry success story. So I think that Alberta's time is now, and it has never been more exciting than today to be involved in technology in Alberta.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think you did a really nice job of showing from that 50,000 foot view what a healthy ecosystem looks like. And when we talk about regeneration, it really is, again, about that investing back in. So when we allow and see success, those pop, and then the nodes become really strong because they usually end up investing and mentoring and advising a handful of be them net new startups, scale ups, or even supporting legacy industry in that transformation. So the wheels are turning, and it's really important for us to take a moment to recognize where we are.
To build on that is, once you've had more and more of those entrepreneurs who have success under their belt, where they can say, I've built something from 0 to 100 employees, from 0 to $10 million of revenue. And I've also made some money of my own in the process. You start to accelerate the pace of investment into future startups, because all of a sudden the quality of the deal flow in Alberta goes up. You've got more and more entrepreneurs who have a track record, who you can say, I know they can build something. And so if I agree with their thesis, if I agree with their vision, I know I can believe in the person and the team they're going to build. Plus they're going to have skin in the game because they will have made maybe $1 million or more on their last venture, and they can put some of that on the table. That, from a VC perspective, makes me so much more excited to put my money into that deal. And it means that due diligence process can be shorter, and the decision-making process can be faster. And, Kelly and Kris, I'm sure, can relate. When you're an entrepreneur and you're raising money, it's a huge distraction from actually building your technology. So if we can get out in Alberta to the point where these decisions are being made faster, because the credibility of the entrepreneurs is going up because of their experience, and the risk of the deals is going down because of the investment, the seed investment by the founders, I think, buckle in, it's going to get really exciting.
Yeah, and investment begets investment, which is really important, because I think many out there in the startup community have, banged their head against many walls here in their local backyard, and there's a really fantastic and healthy investment community here. But depending on industry, have had to have more success in the US or sometimes even in Europe. So the more that we see that here, the more that engine turns. And I want to build on what you were just speaking to, but I want to hook it into something that Kelly mentioned earlier, and that was, when you look at data-driven individuals who really want to innovate, and I'm cautious of the word disrupt, because disrupt is like throwing a wrench in things, but innovate and kind of evolve, at scale, kind of letting them sink their teeth and brains into really big challenges. And so how do we look at a world of abundance, and how are we really bold when we think about innovation and, our economy here in Alberta? And it needs to be, locked into access to data as well, so that we actually can ask great questions, so that we can build big things. So I'm going to really quickly just read a quote from Corey Jansen, the CEO over at Alta ML, on a post that he wrote the other day. And then I want to talk a little bit just around what we need to do to maybe solve access to data sets. So, Corey wrote the other week, the starting point for data-driven innovation is to access data, and lots of it. But in most jurisdictions, frankly, including Alberta, valuable data sets remain siloed within their respective organizations, limiting collaboration, innovation, and knowledge sharing. Imagine the complex problems we could solve if academia, Government, large enterprise, and startups could better share data in an ethical and responsible way. It would have a transformative impact on the provincial innovation ecosystem and empower us to solve Canada's, no, the world's most important problems. However, this cannot take place without policies that enable data-driven innovation, working in tandem with education around it for responsible and ethical implementation. So I just want to dive in and hear your thoughts again around access to actual data sets where we can dig in and, again, answer big questions and build big things. Where are the barriers? Where are the opportunities? What are you sensing? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I'd love to take the first crack at this one because, again, a large pool of that data is government data, right? Like, what are some of the most exciting problems that we can solve? Healthcare, education, justice, social services. How do we make all of those work better and meet the needs of Albertans? And I think, Corey's 100% right in what in the quote you just shared. There's an enormous amount of data out there that if we had the right minds analyzing that and finding ways to add value to that and to create new tools to solve problems in new ways using technology, the outcomes for Albertans, let alone the rest of the world, would be extremely exciting. And I don't even think even those of us around this virtual call right now can even imagine the possibilities, the scope of those possibilities. So, what can the Alberta government's role be in that conversation? Because, if it's a problem for a reason. Well, I think one of the reasons it's a problem is because, we still, you used the words responsible and I think ethical as a part of summing up. I can't remember if that was part of the quote or if it was a part of your segue, but that's the crux of it, right? I think I referenced the comment of privacy by design, which is a new sort of jargon, but it's becoming a bit of a best practice and a bit of a more defined principle for data science and the kind of work that those of us interested in this kind of innovation are building. Because at the end of the day, what do we need? We need Albertans to buy into this process. We need them to feel comfortable with this process. And so if we can create a privacy framework that they're comfortable with, to say, hey, I'm starting to understand what de-identified data means, or what anonymized data means, or even what synthetic data means. And that's a whole nother conversation we might be able to get into at some point today if we have time. But if more folks in Alberta understand what does this whole principle of privacy when it comes to data science mean, and how can we guarantee their protection, and in fact make it better than the status quo by modernizing our privacy rules and regulations, then we can start, and then we start tying connecting the dots to say, okay, we can do this in a way that has got stronger privacy protections than what you have today. And then we start moving it to saying, what can we unlock to make your life better in terms of outcomes if we do this? Then it's not this abstract unknown of sharing data, right? I hate using the words sharing data because it implies something nefarious. But the truth is, the fact is, the truth couldn't be any farther from that fear, but it's the fear of the unknown. So how do we help people overcome that fear of the unknown? So part of that role is for a guy like me to get out and still tell the story of companies like Circle Cardiovascular Imaging, companies like Chata, companies like Neo, and the many other data science-driven companies who are trying to make lives better. And as more and more of those stories get out there, and as we are able to help build this narrative of Alberta is a global leader in data-driven innovation in every industry, including in government, I believe that public appetite will be there to say, okay, I can see why I should get behind this. So that's part of it. The other part of it is to say, okay, well, how do we do this? Well, I like to use an analogy to the energy industry, because you, Jasmine, you kind of highlighted that data is a resource, and Albertans are used to thinking about oil and gas as a resource, and they're comfortable with the development of that, and they've reaped the benefits of it for decades. And so I like to say, well, in Alberta, we're very familiar with the benefits that oil and gas have given. And we were successful in developing that in Alberta because we were not afraid to create a policy and a regulatory environment that encouraged the development of these resources. We were very open-minded and forward-thinking about creating the conditions to encourage value-add industries to build upon that, like refineries and petrochemical facilities, et cetera, et cetera. And then we also were not afraid to say we need to have the vision to build the distribution infrastructure like pipelines and rail capacity to get those products to market. And taken together, those three things of a policy environment that encouraged it, a value add focus with a commercial framework, and then a transportation framework, we've created billions and billions of dollars of value and wealth creation for the benefit of all Albertans. So what could the parallel be in treating data like a resource? Well, again, it comes back to how do we create a policy framework that Albertans can feel confident in to say, here are the safeguards, here are the guardrails. Let's involve the privacy commissioner whose sole job it is to be the steward of Albertans' privacy rights as an independent officer of the legislature. Let's involve them in this process to say, what does it need to look like if we want to move in the direction where we are working with innovators and academics as a government to add value to our data and to create new tools? Then let's do it in a way that the privacy commissioner can say, yeah, this is a safe way to do it. And so if we can create that policy environment that permits the collaboration with the innovators in Alberta and the government to analyze this data and add value to it, that's step one. Step two then is let's create that commercial framework that says who's responsible for what in this scenario. Okay, if company XYZ wants to come in and create a new medical technology and they need access to a certain data set, well, let's talk about what you're trying to do, why you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, what the rules are that are going to govern the sandbox you can play in. And then, okay, what's the Alberta government's responsibility in this whole partnership? What's your responsibility? And then how are Albertans going to benefit if you're successful? We need to iron out some standards to say, here's the roadmap for how you work with the Alberta government so that we can start to do this at scale. And then finally, we need to create that digital transport network. So instead of having pipelines for oil and gas, you need to have a way to say, well, where is the data? What state is it in? What state does it need to be in so that the data scientists can actually do something meaningful with it? And how do we get it from point A to point B in a safe and secure environment so that it can be turned into a format that is actually meaningful for the analysis that needs to take place? And so this doesn't mean we need to send data outside of government. This means we need to find a way how to coordinate the access to it and the format of it, ensure that it respects those privacy frameworks that we talked about, making sure that that's in it as a privacy by design perspective right from the beginning. If we can get those three things in line, the policy framework that permits this, the commercial framework that protects Albertans' stake in this effort, and clarifies who's responsible for what, and then deal with ensuring that that data is no longer stuck in a silo in a format that nobody can do anything with, the possibilities are endless. And I firmly believe that in the same way that oil and gas created tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth for Alberta over the last 50 years, for the next 50 years, I really believe this could create the same amount of wealth. So when you talk about economic growth and diversification, there is no greater, more exciting opportunity for Alberta to diversify its economy than to see a data-driven innovation framework move forward so that innovators in this province can work with the government and we can get the data out of the silos, but still have the right protections in place.
Thank you so much for that, because I think it provides a really good foundation for Kelly and Kris to build on. And so when we think about that framework, also, with both of you building companies right now with the access that you do have to particular data sets where you might need to tap into data, collaboratives or otherwise to really expand that. Also in this really interesting upcoming environment of the potential for yet another energy boom and a tech boom at the same time. So that we're about to go into a really interesting environment in Alberta. But Kelly and Kris, build on what Minister Glubish was talking about from your perspectives of building. Do you have enough access to data? Where are limitations? How do we accelerate that, moving towards that framework that can really amplify and get things going here in Alberta?
Kris, I'll let you start. I'm going to go a
Sure.
bit of a different direction so you can start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what the minister has said really resonated with me. Building NEO. Everybody thinks that there are two steps, sort of to data. You get it, and then you use it. Get the data, use the data, and there's sort of a missing step. Like you end up having the data, and it's not usable. It's not in a place where the people who need it can get to it. And then you've been entrusted with it. So keeping it safe is paramount. Keeping it private is paramount. The last thing any innovator wants is to be painted with the brush of all these companies that have done a bad job with with data security, right? So there are tremendous investments happening. I think most tech companies to protect that data and set it up in a way where it's also not just sort of buried so deep that no one can get to it, but at the same time it's it's available for the innovators and the scientists and everyone who can truly build something valuable with it, right? And that's really hard. Actually, we have more data engineers in Neo who work on just the data sort of storage problems than we actually have data scientists who are working on how to leverage that data for innovation. Right, so it's like the bigger problem to me. How to really build those data systems, and yeah, I don't. I guess I would say I don't think there's sort of like a silver bullet solution, to that problem. It just involves companies putting in the hard work, hiring the right talent, bringing on the right team, having a vision that kind of spans that whole end-to-end, process. From getting the data to actually building usable systems that are secure to then finally, being able to create those innovations. Kelly, where did you want to take it?
Yeah, well, first of all, what Nate said, that's so bang on. Government data is a resource, and as a taxpayer, yeah, the government should be making money if it's exposing its data, just like the resource sector pays royalties on stuff. Maybe that's not what the idea was, but I would absolutely 150% support that, right? That's how you create further economic benefit, not just the economic benefit of the company who's utilizing it and building value out of it. That may or may not be shared with the employees or not, we don't know. But Jasmine, I would take more responsibility on the companies for this problem. Right? We could go around and be like, there's not enough exposed natural language to database query language data, everything else, right? But that's why we had to be forced down, and Nate mentioned it, synthetic data generation. And there was a really good interview with Andrew Ng he said the future of AI is relevant synthetic data generation. So this is one of the huge problems we ran into 2 years ago, right? Databases, you may use the SQL language for it, but it's in a totally different domain and structured totally different. The joins are different. Everything is different. So every customer we ran into is a cold start problem for all the AI people on, right? We didn't have enough data. So we had to learn very quick that we connect to Nike's data warehouse. We have to synthetically generate relevant training data in order to train a model that then works at a 95% accuracy when the non-technical users are actually utilizing it. So it depends on what the use case is, but there's a lot of ways that we as companies as well can get around the lack of data problem that's out there. And you've seen this in the medical imaging world as well with the generative adversarial networks and some of these other ways where they can generate really good synthetic training data. Now it doesn't work in every single use case, but I think it's like a dual approach, right? It'd be awesome if governments and organizations would open up more data, and in certain use cases we have to, like public health and everything like that. But in kind of some of those public type of use cases, it's up to the companies to just, you got to make it happen. Maybe that's the Alberta spirit. I don't know. We just got to make it happen. That's all we can do.
I couldn't agree more. And in fact, I think there's an unhealthy focus on anonymizing data. It's very hard to do. You might think that, we'll take people's names and email addresses out of the data, and now it's anonymous. We live in a world now where, you can take 2 or 3 or 4 anonymous data sets, right? Completely anonymous, correlate them together and start deducing who people are, from totally disparate anonymized data sets. And so you have to go far beyond anonymizing, data to make it usable or to expose it. And yeah, synthetic data. One of the things we do at Neo as well, is, use AI to create that synthetic data because you just have to keep confidentiality. Things like financial data, medical data. That has to be paramount. You can't just be using it for experiments and things. Even anonymized, that's not good enough. synthesizing data and taking the responsibility on yourself to generate that data and build the systems to do that is super, super important.
Yeah, and just to jump in on that, because I think this is a really important point that we need to, I think, dwell on a little bit, is like I agree with Kelly and Kris that there's a big place for the private sector to play in the development of this and to creating a successful data-driven innovation, economic critical mass in Alberta. But one of the things that government's role could be is in helping to flesh out the definition of some of these terms. What is de-identification? What is anonymization? What are the standards? What is synthetic data? And what is the framework that we should consider as the best practice, so that it helps to bring clarity to the market, so that those private sector innovators can start saying, I know what the rules are. I know what is right and what is wrong. I know what the expectations are, and I know where to focus my efforts and my resources so that I can play by the rules in a way that respects Albertans' privacy. This can be done. And in fact, we're not the only ones talking about this. The UK has done a couple of amazing partnerships with their National Health Service, with some medical technology companies, completely reinventing the concept of medical innovation and new therapeutics. And to the point where they're able to collaborate within the right privacy framework that is exceeding global best practice standards today, and is essentially writing those best practices. We know that the United States government is doing a ton of this kind of stuff with some of their healthcare and even with their defense systems. So we don't have to worry about being the only ones on the bleeding edge. We should be on the cutting edge. We should be early adopters, and we should be eager to innovate. Because we could put Alberta into a position of significant advantage on the global scale by doing so. But we don't have to worry about are we completely inventing something brand new that no one's ever thought of, and we're going to have unintended consequences. I think we're at the perfect time in history where we can benefit from those who went a little bit before us, but they're not so far ahead that we're playing catch up. And we can truly still be a part of those in the global scene who are leading the development of these best practices, and again, implementing privacy by design principles in this framework. But what does that mean? Well, let's create some definitions for what that means. And similar to ethics by design, not only what are you doing, but why are you doing it and how are you doing it? And is this something that all Albertans can feel confident in? If you can't say yes to that, then it probably shouldn't be happening, but the devil's in the details. And so one of the roles for government, I believe, is in consultation and collaboration with industry and academics, is to say, what is the right framework that we can all get behind and feel confident in, that's not going to unnecessarily shackle us and hold us back from the innovation we need to accomplish, but instead is going to enable us and give us the certainty and confidence to move forward in a safe and secure and respectful manner. In the same way that we have the most responsible development of natural resources in Alberta out of any jurisdiction in the world, we can have the most responsible development of data-driven innovation in Alberta. I believe that, and I believe that that's partly the role of the Alberta government to help make that happen.
And it's interesting. So some dots connecting in the back of my mind as you were speaking, and one is, when you point at some examples in the UK, many of the health networks there have actually worked with an organization called Hattusia to create a shared tech ethics framework based on data and privacy. And when you talk about frameworks, we're really talking about common language, and that doesn't mean that we boil it down to so-called common tongue, because these are complex scenarios, systems, and policies. But really curious, especially Kelly, Nate, thinking about the playbook, the frameworks, the standards, and best practices. Where are we at in a maturity in Alberta, and where can we lead, perhaps? I'm so glad you brought up ethics, Minister Glubish. So glad.
Yeah, well, I guess I would say right now we are in a position where we have a lot of opportunity, because our legislation and our regulations that tie into this whole framework are really, really old. And even if we weren't thinking about the data-driven innovation opportunities, it's in need of modernization, right? Some of our privacy legislation predates the internet, like I said about some of our technology systems. So how could it possibly be protecting Albertans in a modern economy where everything is digitized in a market of social media and mobile phones, and like you are expecting something that was written on a stone tablet to be relevant today, right? Like a bit of an analogy there. So we do need to take some time to get that right and to modernize it so that we can better protect Albertans. While we're at it, let's make sure that it provides that clarity for all of the things we've just talked about so that we can unleash the creative and innovative capacity of the Alberta marketplace and become the destination of choice in the entire world.
So Kelly and Kris, from your experience, are we at a point, as we're accelerating and taking a look at our data-driven economy, the tech ecosystem, do we have shared language? Do we have maturity of frameworks? Where are we at in that maturity spectrum in your mind?
Kelly, do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, geographically, I think probably getting better piece by piece. I think, if you're not a IBM or a consulting group or a big Microsoft or something like that, it's like you don't have the credibility that, especially here, like especially in our city, right? It's very much like go to the big consulting firms and just get them to come in and kind of do stuff for you. Make sure there's the privacy and all those other types of pieces. But again, I still bring this back to the companies. It's up to the companies, right? Like, in the wealth management space, we learned early and in a couple other areas as well that we just can't kind of complain to say, oh, they don't want us to have any information. Like we have never stored transactional data, but sometimes there's item names, maybe a username, something like that, because that's part of the language someone would ask for. They would say, what are all ETF accounts for Kelly Cherniwchan that we bought in the last 3 months? That's an important component to delivering the value of the system. So Reg Willett, he runs our technology group. He, a couple of years ago, said, we have to make everything deployable. The entire AI inference engine and everything has to be deployable. So we never, ever see that. We don't care about it. It's not important to us. Everything trains within their own, within their infrastructures, in their own cloud infrastructures. So again, it's like people, if you absolutely have to hold on to the data, there's got to be checks, balances, ethics as well, more than just legal things for sure. But we know that sometimes businesses bend the rules when it comes to ethics quite a bit. But at the same time, companies can provide corporations and security professionals within those corporations or government a lot more, decrease their stress levels if they know that nothing is ever going to leave their infrastructure. So anyway, Kris, go ahead.
I guess just, I think the original question was where are we at? I guess I feel a little bit lucky because in the the financial banking system, it's actually pretty heavily regulated in Canada. There are a lot of regulations, and so we're not like in the Wild West. It's not totally open season, with no language and no rules and no standards. I think the medical space, also, is regulated and there are some standards. But to the minister's point, even those are getting out of date very quickly. So we look at regulations for things like credit card data, and we're already seeing that they're hopelessly out of date. Even after 3 or 4 years since the last sort of regulatory updates, they're almost immediately going out of date. What will happen is the regulations will be written around technology that exists today, and then Amazon releases some new cloud thing, and Google releases their version of it, and suddenly it's just everyone's building with those tools, and the regulations are hard to apply, right? Or they don't seem to apply or take everything into account. So I think the missing piece it's not that there's no language, no rules, no regulations, but I do think we need to be way better at being fast. We need to be updating them at like every single year and not waiting a decade and then waiting another decade. And it's not just government. It is even industry, even banking, medicine. But I think every single area, there are frameworks and languages and rules in place, but they are still kind of moving slow, I would say. I don't know if like Nate, or Kelly would agree with that.
I 100% agree with the fact that we got to be faster. I mean, like I said, if our privacy legislation is over 30 years old, there's a problem, right? Because we haven't even looked at it in 30 years. So to your point, like financial regulations in an industry that is going through a massive disruption right now for good reason. And I'm really excited about that, the direction that things are going there and the possibilities of the fintech market. We need to make sure that the regulatory environment doesn't hold that back. So one thing that we've seen in some other jurisdictions is the creation of regulatory sandboxes to say, you know, if you're in this space and you're trying to do something new and disruptive, here's how you can work with the government. It's not Wild West, like you said, but here's a defined sort of carve out where you could come in and test something quickly and iterate quickly. And let's see if the tech's going to work or not. And let's work together to make sure there's still safeguards. But let's say, you know, for this test period, for a defined test period, you could try something and not have to be dealing with the full regulatory framework to start with. That has had some success in certain jurisdictions. And in those jurisdictions that did that, they had an influx of innovation of folks saying, well, I want to be there because as I'm building what I'm trying to build, I can do it there faster without the same handcuffs. I'm still going to need to make sure the finished product is behaving well and meeting the highest of standards. But at least in the development phase, we have a little bit more flexibility. I think that that's a huge opportunity for Alberta to explore the implementation of some regulatory sandboxes so that, for example, fintech companies like Neo might be able to build something really exciting a little bit faster. But to the other point of how we need to be faster at modernizing our rules and regulations, I 100% agree. As you know, we've been focused on red tape reduction for starters, which is eliminating wherever possible unnecessary regulatory burdens to save Albertans and Alberta businesses money and to unleash their productive capacity. And we've had some really good success with that, eliminating well over $1 billion of annual costs per year in these last 3 years of unnecessary costs. But once we get our regulatory environment sort of right-sized, the next opportunity, I believe, is in saying, where are the areas that are just a part like the fintech space that are evolving so quickly that we need to evolve with them? And we need to be working with industry to understand it. We need to be investing in building the expertise inside of government so that the policymakers actually know what you're talking about when you're saying, I'm trying to, you know, do this cool data-driven thing over here. Like, that's been part of my experience as a minister in a technology related ministry. I go in there and I talk technology and they're like, yeah, we're really technologically innovative. And then they go and talk about like, yeah, we're moving to Microsoft Office 365 in the cloud. And I'm like, that's great. I commend that. But that is not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about positioning Alberta for really exciting technological advances. And so thankfully, over the last 3 years, I've had some success at changing that culture and opening their eyes to what's possible. We need more of that in government so that the folks who are writing the rules and regulations and bringing them to ministers like me with recommendations to say, here's what we think the right direction is. There needs to be a better understanding. And the only way to do that is to have more collaboration with industry along the way to say, help me understand what you're trying to do and why. Help me understand what it would take to do this. Help me understand what other jurisdictions that you like are doing and why you like it. That doesn't mean we have to give industry everything they're asking for, because government's role is to be the intermediary between the business and the public and to find the right balance. But if we raise the bar in terms of the understanding of technology principles and practices and objectives within the civil servants who are doing the important work to flesh this out, and hopefully ensure that there's a handful of maybe MLAs and ministers who understand the space too, I think we're going to end up with better decisions and more quickly iterating regulatory frameworks so that we can enable more innovation in Alberta. And if we do that right, we'll have a huge advantage over every other jurisdiction in Canada.
And by the way,
it looks like you wanted to add. Great.
Yeah, just to chime in, you know, I think a lot of people, you know, all over the world think that the governments just write the regulations themselves, and a lot of times, you know, as alluded to by Nate, that's not the case. It's collaborative. You know, like for example, the payment card industry, they write their own regulations, right? It's the credit card networks coming together, or like you know, the big banks in Canada are writing their own regulations and standards. Bodies like Interact or you know, things like that about how they work with each other. I mean, there's not always regulations, you know, that are put forth by the Alberta government or the Canadian government, and so that collaboration does have to improve so that you know, those regulations apply regardless of whether they're a government regulation or an industry regulation. We'll move a lot faster if we can establish those lines of communication, those sandboxes, those faster iterations, being more inclusive, listening to more stakeholders. All those things really matter.
All right, we've got about 10 minutes left with you. I do have one question from the audience that I'll bubble up, but I believe it actually connects to the other bookend of the question I currently have. And I do want to go back to talent a little bit, because while we were talking over the last even couple of threads of conversation, speed and the ability to kind of like react and grow and test and build really quickly was important. So I want to talk about talent development and speed. So I want you to speak to what echelon and types of talent do we need? Because also when we talked about this earlier, what does data mean when you say the word data to Albertans? What does talent mean when we're talking about a data-driven digital economy? Because talent is the one thing everyone talks about right now. We need talent, but what kind of talent? Do we need 10,000 data scientists right now? Do we need digital leadership on the C-suite level that understand this? So I would love, just from each of your perspectives, and Kelly, we'll start with you. What does talent mean to you when we think about a data economy? What type of talent should we be developing, and at what kind of speed?
Yeah, that's a really deep question there. So I'll start with more of a culture thing than talent, right? Like if you have to have some level of understanding. Like if you're getting into the machine learning and AI game, you have to have some fundamental understanding. If you're talking about AI left, right, and center and everything else, and you've never built a model for yourself before, that's part of the problem worldwide with this AI stuff, right? You go to a conference, you can hear somebody doing a talk who's never actually got their hands in dirty before. And so what that does is sometimes create this disconnect between startups or technology leadership with the people who are doing the really hard work in the trenches, right? So I tie that back to the leadership thing, because even if you bring that into the larger corporations, I'm sure it's extremely difficult for a lot of data analysts in their organization to try get data projects funded. It is difficult, right? And especially in more conservative groups, this is the thing that comes up a lot. So, building good, strong business use cases with dollars attached to them will allow you to win over those particular groups. So let's say you get those data projects. Now we're tying into what you're talking about is, what do we need more people of? I'll look outside of just our needs right now and what I see in Alberta. We have such an opportunity in the IoT space, ag tech. Like we just have incredible opportunity in the energy space as well. And Kris will attest to this. Data engineers are critical. Data scientists are super critical, but those data pipelines are fundamentally important, especially if you have streaming data coming off of sensors. Being able to make that usable much more quickly is just a fundamental basis to building very strong data companies, but cultures of understanding of that. And I was just blown away this last year. I was getting quite a bit more educated on these complex cloud infrastructures, these data pipelines. It is extremely complex. And so the more of that we have, the more there is to spread around for a lot of these startups. So maybe they raise some seed money, then they get to the Series A, and 60% of their Series A is being spent on totally re-architecting the entire system because they realize they can't scale. Where some more of that talent earlier on is critical as well. But with that being said, there's still business. You need good talent in business who understand digital marketing, who understand how to sell and market APIs versus applications, and so it's evolving for sure. So I would say across the board, but very much people who know how data pipelines work is going to be critical for us to grow quite fast in the data economy.
Thanks, Kelly. Excellent points. You also answered, I would say, the question from the audience while doing that. So fantastic. Kris, talk to me about talent and culture and mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. We hire a lot of entry level people, junior people out of our universities, because our universities are really good, our colleges are really good, the people graduating are amazing. And a third of our engineering team, are entry level, first job out of school people. But the bottleneck is that we need mentors for those people, we need teachers for those people, and we could hire more people coming right out of school and build, that the economy in Alberta even bigger and provide futures for all those people. The bottleneck is mentors and the people with that experience. So I would definitely say that that's a hard commodity to come by, and it's the brain drain to the United States. It's also things like it's a new industry, so there just aren't that many experts around, right? And that's a tough problem to solve, getting those top experts in the door. There's no, I think, perfect solution to that. It's just very competitive out there. Alberta needs to be competitive to keep and retain that talent here in the province, or at local startups, or even big companies. Beyond that, I was going to also talk a bit about how I think, sometimes we focus too much on specialists. And, Kelly kind of touched on data engineers and on, data scientists, and it can become even more specialized. All right, well, within data scientists, maybe you have a machine learning specialist, or you might have a, AI specialist. And I would say, like, we actually need more generalists. It's really important to have people who can understand, the full picture when it comes to data. So from ingestion of the data all the way to the final uses of the data, people who can work on the data engineering parts and the data science parts. And if we're not building, everyone up to have that generalist knowledge, we need good communication at the very least. So, ways to have common ways of understanding each other, transparency, and interaction between our teams. That's something I actually see falling apart at a lot of companies these days. They will actually hire great data scientists, then they'll hire some great data engineers, they'll hire some maybe infrastructure admins for building out cloud systems, they'll hire some software developers, and then none of them talk to each other. And that completely breaks down right out of the gate, even with that tremendous level of talent that you've got, right? So you have to figure out, well, why aren't we talking to each other? Oh, we all have very different languages, we all work in different stacks, we all come from different educational backgrounds. Okay, how do we marry those things up? It's a really hard problem, honestly, that sort of people side. And so we're constantly trying to do things like cross training to build more of that generalist knowledge, and to actually make sure that we don't have sort of a lot of geniuses essentially, but working in silos and never really driving the business fast enough.
Thanks, Kris. Nate, why don't you chime in just on mentorship, and then we'll get to the last question. Everyone.
Just real quick, I think that was the thing that stood out to me from what Kris said, and I 100% agree. And that's one of the things that I think is a big limiter, right? That's one of the reasons why we can't just say, well, let's train 10,000 new people tomorrow and dump them into the market. It's because you don't have enough folks to then give them meaningful assignments and help them to succeed in those assignments. So over time, we need a bit of a step change where it's like we get this many more people, and then they need to take some time to become more experienced, and then you get this many more people, and et cetera. It's a step curve. It's not just like a straight line. And so, of course, we've talked about, as a government, we're investing in creating more spaces in areas like the tech space that are critically important. But over time, then I talked about like what happened in Ontario. Well, the BlackBerry example, right? Like they grew to this level of critical mass. So there were enough people who could mentor the next generation of first timers. And so guys like Kris and Kelly, they are the mentors. And there are thousands of them like that across Alberta, but we need tens of thousands of them like that to really get to where we could go as a province. But that isn't a role that government can fix on its own. That's a role that naturally will happen if we are filling the pipeline of new grads, of high quality grads, if we're creating the conditions that encourage innovation and commercialization of ideas coming out of our post-secondary systems. That's going to feed into that. And bit by bit, we are seeing that growth, but we need to be a little bit patient because it's going to take some time. But one of the things government can do is to try and say, in what areas do we need more tech talent inside of government, and how might we be able to create some of these co-op programs or internship opportunities? For example, maybe in Alberta's cybersecurity work, or in our efforts to apply more AI and machine learning into making government services better, or into our work to digitize and modernize government services. And so that is something that I'm looking at very actively, is to say, how could we create some more opportunities and collaborate with our post-secondary institutions, collaborate with private sector innovators as well, and say, you know, you can apply these skills inside of government just as much as you could inside of private sector. There'll be challenging and exciting opportunities for you to work on. It will build your resume, build your experience. And over time, we will then fill the market with more people who can be the next generation of mentors. And every batch of new mentors we create, we open up the throttle a little bit more, because there's that many more people training the next generation. So it's going to be an exponential curve. It's been slow going the last 5 years. I think the next 5 years, we're going to see 10 times, if not 20 times as much progress in that regard.
You know, I like to look at it as ROC, or return on community. And so when you take a look at really healthy innovation ecosystems, exactly, you see the big unicorn pop, then you see the resurgence of just investment back into the community, but mentorship playing a huge and massive role there, as well as just the constant leveling up of a digital intelligence maturity in a community. And I think that we've got a really great momentum there in Alberta. And kudos, of course, the folks at YYC DataCon, and just community meetup, connections, mentorship. Invest in your own backyard with your knowledge. It's critical. So we are at 2 minutes over, so I apologize. I wanted to get to their happy hours and also make sure they get a good night's sleep before the Neo party tomorrow. But I'm going to ask each of you for your one headline. So I want you to imagine we're in 2030. What's the international headline of success for Alberta? It can be for a company, it can be for the ecosystem, but I want you to say, what's the sound bite that you think that we kind of raise up or kind of stand on a platform to holler? Anyone want to take that first? Otherwise, I'll call on one of you to give it a go.
I'll go. My vision and goal would be for the headline to be something like, Alberta dominates the global data economy. Full
Love
stop.
It. Nice. Kris.
I'll go next. I think Alberta dreams big ambitions. That's what I think it's about. We're going to see that in the next couple of years, far more than we have in the past, dreaming really big when it comes to things like data and tech.
Wonderful. Kelly.
I'd like to say Alberta karaoke capital of the world, but I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a headline or more of a story. I think we will always continue to be world innovators on the stage when it comes to energy. Maybe different sources of energy, but that's what I still think. Even come 2030, we're going to be the leaders in that space. There's going to be a lot of other things going around, but at the end of the day, it's technology that's going to drive the future, and you need energy for everything. Doesn't matter what you do, you need energy. And so I feel like in 2030, we will be leaders in that space still, just may look a little bit different.
I think that's really bold, and I think that if I were to look, behind this brick wall at the Energy Transition Center and a bit of the hub of innovation happening down here in Calgary about that I think there's others that share that. And you're right. And there's a level of boldness to, I think, even just the culture here in Alberta that has accelerated and is different. And we've cranked the notch up to 11, whereas, in the past, there was a bit of a risk averseness, I think, in the tech sector, just because it was new to us. So in watching and working in different, markets around the world, there's a powering of the shoulders here in Alberta that is really amazing to watch. And it's thanks to people like you, without a doubt.